Today's Frugal Friday video is for the Lilac. This is a free pattern from Blue Calla. Blue Calla has several free patterns on her website, so I hope to do more of them, but this is one that I thought was really cute. And I had an idea to do two different versions to showcase some of the different options that you can do with this pattern. For one version, I included the option of piping and a twist lock. For the other version, I did not add any piping and I used a magnetic snap for the closure instead of a twist lock. On this one for the flap, I did a panel, and on this one, I used a panel for the back of the bag. On this version, I added a zipper on the back. The pattern does tell you to add a zipper on the back, but I did add a zipper overlay. I added a tag at the bottom, and then I added another cork tag here at the bottom here. I love this back feature on this one, but I did not want to do it on this one because I was using a panel. On the inside, you can see it opens really nice. We do have one slip pocket there, and I left mine open big, so I thought it'd be a perfect place to drop your phone in or your wallet so you don't kind of get things lost inside there. When you watch me make this bag, you're going to see a couple things. One thing is I struggle quite a bit with my connectors getting them straight. I actually seam ripped the entire bag on this one to sew those connectors on better. All the fabrics that I'm using today for both the panels, the exteriors, and the linings are all from Jen's Fabrics. It is a cotton canvas. These will actually be on pre-order on March the 15th. I'll have all the information in my description for how to get these, as well as all the information for how to get the pattern. The only things I would kind of tell you to watch, I followed the pattern directions for the interfacing, which is to have fleece on the lining. I don't know that I would add fleece on another one. I think me using a cotton canvas and using a layer of SF101 or a different medium weight interfacing, whatever your preference is, on all the pieces, for me, that's sufficient. So yes, the fleece is great to add the structure, but I felt like I could have made a really good bag without it and just saved myself a little bit of issues with some of the bulk I had. So these are the two bags that you're going to watch me sew up in today's video. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy watching me make these bags, and I hope that you make them too. Try out this free pattern. I'd love to see your creations. I am so excited to start sewing up these two bags. I'm going to try to go along with the pattern on almost everything. That's why I'm making two bags, because I wanted to do two different options so that hopefully I can include all the different components that this pattern has, even though I'm doing them on two separate bags. You could of course do them all on one bag. The first thing I'm going to work on is the flap. I'm going to make two versions of the flap. One of the flaps is going to be this one where I'm using a panel on the front. Since I'm using a panel on the front of this one, I'm going to use a magnetic snap for the closure instead of a twist lock so that I don't mess with the panel or take away from it at all. On both of my flap pieces, I have SF101. On the lining for the flap, I have a layer of fleece, which I kept out of the seam allowance. That's the same thing for this second flap that I'm doing as well. For this flap, I'm not using a panel. I did sew on a tag, but I'm using the same interfacing and using the same fleece on the lining. On this one, what's going to be different, since I'm not using the panel, I'll be adding a twist lock and I'm going to add piping. So let's go ahead and get these started. The first thing I'll do is I'll add the piping on this one. And I've sewn piping a couple times on this channel, but I'll still take the time to show you how I'm going to do it again. I'm using pre-made piping. Because of that, I had to pay attention to how wide this flange is. The flange is the part that is hanging free from the piping cord. It is the extra fabric. My flange here is 1/4 of an inch from the raw edge to the edge of the piping cording. My seam allowance is bigger than that on this bag. That means I need to offset this piping. If I placed the piping against the edge, knowing that my seam allowance is bigger, I'm going to lose most of this piping. So I'm going to have to offset mine so that I can make for sure, you can get out a ruler and make for sure that when you sew with the seam allowance, you will get right against that edge of the cording. That is what you want, so that just the cording pokes through, not any of the extra material. So I'm going to place my piping here at the top. I'm going to put my foot down and I'm going to make for sure that the edge of the flap is in the seam allowance and that I'm sewing right up against that cording. I'll adjust as I go along here. So let's just start sewing. We backstitch there at the front or the top, and just we're going to keep going around. I'm going to go very slow because, like I said, I want to make for sure that I'm going to get right up against that piping the whole time. And since I'm not using any clips, I'll just be adjusting as I go. So here's how my piping looks. I did not need to snip any corners. Everything laid really well when I was going around the flap. No problems at all. So you can see I have quite a bit of overhang of my flap, but that is because my piping was not the same seam allowance as I needed it to be. Yours may not look like that, especially if you cut your own piping. It's a lot easier. Also, something else, if you're uncomfortable sewing piping, you're getting new to it, you could always use a glue stick or double-sided tape to kind of lay it down first so you don't have to worry about measuring it like I did and making for sure it fits all along. So once you have your piping on, you can go ahead and put these right sides together. This is the flap that I'm going to use the twist lock on. So I'll sew everything right sides together on this one and then add the twist lock. But on this one, for the magnetic snap, definitely have to place it first because it is a prong snap and it would show if I didn't. At this point, I'm going to sew both of the flaps the same way. Start at the top, go all the way around, leaving this top open. Back stitch when you start and stop. The seam allowance is big enough that I feel like trimming with some pinking shears around this curve, or if you don't have pinking shears, using scissors that make some snips would be helpful and having a nice curve here. So let's sew both of these and then turn them right sides out. Look at how adorable these two flaps look already. One with the panel, one with the piping and a tag. Both of them are super cute. So I have not pressed them. I just put clips around the edges to kind of compress it and to have it holding the shape I want while I top stitch. So let's top stitch all the way around that edge we just sewed, and then let's baste the top close. While I'm top stitching, I'm going to make sure I'm keeping all the extra fabric pushed flat so that I don't have any bunching or puckering after I top stitch. Both of my flaps are complete. Let's talk a little bit about the placement for the twist lock as well as the placement for the magnetic snap. Even though I placed this already, I did use the pattern measurements to make for sure I had it in the right place. Just note that the pattern measurements are given for after you sew these together, so take into consideration your seam allowance. For the twist lock, you are going to have two different measurements given. It's going to be a measurement with piping and a measurement without piping. Just because the designer knows that extra piping, you would need to account for it when you're measuring how to place your twist lock. I'm using this twist lock on the front of mine. It will take me a little while to install the twist locks. I typically don't do them on camera. What I do first is I'll find the placement and then I'll mark the areas for the screw holes. And then you have to cut out that entire opening there and then screw this in place. It goes on the front, this part, but then it also screws on the back. So it has to go through all the layers. It's a very slow process, so I'm not showing that on camera. So this will be the part that I install here on the flap. This will be the part that I will install on my body piece. The pattern piece actually has the mark for where you'll place this part of your twist lock or this part of your magnetic snap. So I'll do this part off camera and I'll set it aside, and then we'll pull the flaps back out whenever we are ready to attach them to the rest of the bag. Now that we have the flap completed, let's start working on some of these body pieces. Let's start with the exterior back first. So my exterior front, I don't have anything to do with it right now, so I'm going to set it aside. But on this version, I am making a zipper pocket. The pattern does have the instructions for the zipper pocket. What I'm doing differently is I'm adding an overlay to mine instead of just a regular zipper pocket. The back for this other bag that I'm doing is going to have the panel there. So one of my bags will have the panel on the flap, the other will have the panel on the back. I definitely did not want to add a zipper pocket onto this piece because I did not want to mess up this beautiful print. So I'm setting this piece aside. So the only zipper I'm adding in both bags is going to be this one on the back. The first thing I'll do is I'm going to sew around the exterior of this overlay. I slipped a woven tag in the bottom so whenever I sew across here, it'll catch it and to secure it in place. I also added a tag here at the bottom just for a decorative touch. So let's go ahead and sew 1/8 of an inch around the exterior perimeter of this overlay. As far as where to place the overlay, you can use the same measurements for the zipper pocket. I did go just a little bit lower, but you don't have to. I had a slight bit of stretching on my overlay. It's not horribly bad, but I can tell it. Just be careful if you're using a stretchy vinyl. You may want to interface it first so that you don't have the stretching like I did, or use a walking foot to try to prevent some of it. So now that I have this sewn on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it and just make a tiny snip there in the middle, open it back up, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim all around this overlay piece. I want to trim away the extra fabric. So now that I got it started, I'll flip over to the back and use my finger to make sure I'm not going through that vinyl overlay, but I'm going to cut about 1/4 of an inch all the way around from that previous row of stitching, going slow and being very cautious so that I don't cut any of the vinyl. Here's how that overlay looks. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my lining piece. This is going to be for that zipper pocket. The pattern actually has it cut into 2. I just had not cut mine into 2 yet. So go ahead and make for sure that you have 2 separate pieces for your zipper pocket lining. And the way I do mine is I'll have one of my lining pieces right sides up. I'll place my zipper on top right sides up, and then I'm just going to sew it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across this top, connecting the 2 pieces. After you have those sewn together, what I do is I'll lift up my zipper tape and flip that lining back so that I'm now looking at the wrong side of the lining but the right side of my zipper tape. I take it back over to my machine and then I just tack down that zipper tape and seam allowance to the lining piece. I do that about 1/8 of an inch away. This is how that looks. I'm going to repeat those same steps for the other side. Matching up the top, but now this time I have to make sure that I match up my sides and then do that same stitching. Now I'm just going to slide on my zipper pull and then I'll trim down my zipper tape. Now take that zipper pocket lining, have your zipper right sides up so that you're looking at the correct side of the zipper. Take this back exterior piece and you're going to lay it right on top with it going right sides up as well so that you're looking at everything correctly. If your zipper pull is as big as mine, go ahead and slide it through. Make sure the zipper pocket lining is evenly on both sides. I want both of it wide open. So you can see here's the bottom, here's the top. I'm going to make sure that my zipper teeth are centered in the middle of this opening. You can use double-sided tape here if you like to do that. I'm just going to take it over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to be really careful and to make sure that I sew around her, trying to keep the zipper tape exactly in the middle, but I also have to worry about that stretching because mine was stretching. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch around the inside of this zipper overlay. I'm going to try to go slow and see if that'll help to prevent any extra stretching or maybe the most minimal amount of stretching. Here is how that zipper pocket looks. Now let's flip it over. And what I want to do is I want to pull the lining pocket down flat. I have some overhang, so I'll trim that up. I'm going to choose to leave this bottom of this pocket open so that I can berth the bag through it. So I'm just going to turn up these raw edges and sew down the sides. And that'll make it just a little bit easier whenever I'm closing up the pocket to have a neat finish. So now that I have that clipped into place, I'll go back to the exterior side now, and then I'm going to sew down the sides of this pocket. back stitch. I'll trim up the overhang. Let's do the same thing on the other side. So let's talk about our exterior pieces. So for these two pieces, all I need to do now is make the darts and my exterior pieces will be done. On this one, I'm going to make the darts, but this is also going to be the one that's going to get piping all around the bag panel. You only have to put piping on one of the pieces since this is not a gusseted bag. They'll be sewn right sides together, so piping only needs to go on one. I will add the piping after I sew my darts. I'm going to show you how I make the darts. What you do is you just fold them right sides together, and I kind of crease and put a clip there. I always start sewing my darts at the bottom. So I line up that bottom edge with the seam allowance in the pattern. And then I start sewing, and I don't stop sewing until I run out of room on the fabric. So I just keep sewing all the way down. So backstitch when you start, and keep that same seam allowance. And I'm past the dart now, but I'm going to keep sewing about 5 stitches or so past that dart. Backstitch. I'll probably trim up that a little bit, about by half. And then when you poke it out, you can see you just have that beautiful dart. Now after I do the dart on this other one, then I'll go ahead and add the piping around this piece. I will sew the darts for both of the exteriors on both of the bags. I have all the darts sewn onto my exteriors, and I have the twist lock attached here on the main panel. I was getting ready to sew the piping on to this piece. The designer actually wants you to not put the piping all the way to the top like I did with the flap. I'm assuming to reduce bulk, but what you need to do is you need to have it not going all the way to the top. So I'm just going to take it down maybe about a 1/2 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, something like that. And I'm going to start it there. So I'll have it kind of folded at a 90-degree angle, and I'll just start sewing it down. I'll make sure that it's even on both sides and then go ahead and sew it around the same way. But I did want to bring that up, that you do not sew the piping all the way to the top on this main exterior piece. You do on the flap, just not on this main piece. So I'll sew that off camera, but I just want to talk about it a little bit. Next thing I wanted to do though was to start working on the lining pieces. So for the lining, the pattern calls for a slip pocket on one side. I'm going to be sewing 2 slip pockets because I'm making 2 bags. You could easily add a slip pocket on both sides of your bag, or even a slip pocket on one, zipper on the other. Doesn't matter. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to attach a woven tag to the inside of my slip pocket. Doesn't really matter where I add this woven label, as long as I'm taking into account the seam allowance so that I don't lose any of my print on this label. So I'm just going to put it there on the side, and then I'm going to baste that in place. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the other slip pocket piece, place it right sides together, matching up all the sides. We start sewing here at the top, backstitch, go over, then down, all the way around, back up, over, backstitch again. We're going to leave an opening big enough to turn this slip pocket through. After we sew it, the designer tells us to go ahead and trim down our seam allowance everywhere except where we have the opening. Do not trim your seam allowance down at the opening. Then we'll turn this right sides out. I did go ahead and trim down my seam allowance with pinking shears for everywhere except at the top. I want to turn this right sides out. I also wanted to take the time to kind of talk about some interfacing. On my slip pockets, I'm using a cotton canvas. It has a really good structure to it, so I did not add anything as far as interfacing onto this slip pocket piece. On the exteriors, I just had the SF101. That's what the pattern calls for, but it does call for on the lining flap and the 2 lining main body pieces to add fleece. So I did follow those pattern instructions exactly. That's how I did both of these bags. Was I only had the exteriors interfaced with the SF101 or medium weight interfacing, and then I added a fleece or a thermoland to the lining pieces. If you want, you can take this over the iron and press it flat, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and top stitch across the top of this to close up that opening. Clip this in place and go slow while I'm top stitching just across the top, 1/8 of an inch. So let's pull out one of those lining pieces. You can see I do have the Thermoland fleece on the back. I did keep it out of the seam allowance. I'm going to place that lining piece right sides up. I have not made the darts yet, or not sewn the darts together yet. Just going to put this slip pocket on here. Make sure I have it centered nicely. You can use the pattern measurements for the placement. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here at the top, back stitch, and stitch all the way around, back stitching whenever I stop here at the other side. Of course, we will leave the top open. If you wanted to divide this, you could, but I'm going to leave mine completely one piece, just so it's a nice big pocket, maybe for a phone or a wallet. Here is how that lining piece looks. The pattern only calls for one slip pocket on one lining piece. You obviously could do whatever you wanted, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew these darts on this one, and then I will make the other slip pocket, attach it to the lining piece for the other bag I'm making, add my piping, and then we'll come back and talk about our next steps. For the rest of the steps, I'm just going to be showing this version. I'm still working on the other version off camera, but I just thought for simplicity and make it a little bit easier to follow. Here's all the pieces we have. We have our flap with the lining and a snap. We have the back exterior with the zipper pocket. I have one lining with nothing on it, the front with a magnetic snap, and then the other lining with the slip pocket attached. I also need a way to connect the strap to this bag. So for my connectors, let's look how they are going to come together. We are given a measurement in the pattern. You cut out that piece, and then you fold the raw edges to the middle, and then you fold again. I'm using a cotton canvas and did not add any interfacing, but if you feel you need it, definitely add that there. I'm using an O-ring for my connector. I want to talk a little bit about an O-ring. So this O-ring is 1 inch, but the 1 inch is there in the middle. On the bottom and the top, it's not really 1 full inch, it's more 3/4 of an inch. So this connector piece though is 1 inch wide. If you used a 3/4 of an inch, it would fit perfectly in the bottom, but I really feel like it just doesn't look good. I feel like it looks a little wonky. So let me show you what I do. I'm going to top stitch down the long edges of this connector, but the way I'm going to put it together is I'm going to have it just like this. So you can see this connector is more towards the middle. If you look inside there, you can see that I have a lot of it down below. If I would pull it all down below like this and have it perfectly fitting in that crease, you can see how wrinkled it would look. So instead what I do is I have it lifted up, and then I top stitch across the connector about right here. It's just below where that O-ring sits. This is something I do with the O-ring. You could easily use a D-ring, a rectangular ring, or even one of the triangle connectors on this. I just had a lot of O-rings. The pattern calls for O-rings, so I thought, you know what, let's use those because I don't use them a lot. So what I'm going to do now for this connector is I'm going to go ahead and top stitch down both of the long edges. After you have it top stitched, you're just going to slip your connector, whichever one you're using, O, D, rectangle. For me, I'm going to make sure I have that really nice and flat looking. And then I'm just going to go all the way down here to do my top stitching. Here's how this looks. I'm going to do the same thing to the other one for the other side, but we don't attach these until after we sew the exteriors together. So I'm going to set it aside, and now I'm going to put together my 2 exteriors. We also don't add the flap until after these are sewn together. I kept rereading like, wait, why am I not adding the flap yet? But that is what we do. So hold off on adding those things. Place your back and your front exteriors right sides together. Start matching at the top and then clip all the way around. I nested the seams on the bottom. You can nest or butterfly, whatever your preference is, and I clipped everything together. On this bag, I have this zipper pocket and I left the opening. My hopes is that I can turn everything through here and I'll close up that lining through this pocket. The pattern is written so that you will actually leave the opening in the lining of the bag, not in the zipper pocket. On the other bag, I didn't even put a zipper, so I have to close the bag through the lining there. But on this one, I'm going to try to close it through the opening here. I'm still going to leave an opening on the lining on this one too, just in case it won't turn easily through this pocket. And I will leave that opening in between the darts. But for the exterior, I'm going to sew all the way around with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Here's how the exterior looks sewn together. I'm going to use my pinking shears, and I'm definitely going to trim up my seam allowance by about half. I'll go off camera and sew the lining right sides together, but I'll leave that opening at the bottom. Then we will come back, add the flap and the connectors. So now that we have the exterior and the lining sewn together, I turn the exterior right sides out, and the pattern tells us to clip those connectors on the center of that seam. So you'll leave a little bit overhanging. The pattern gives you the full amounts of the overhang and things like that. So I'm going to have a little bit overhanging there, and then I'm just going to baste these into place on both sides. I'm basting from the wrong side simply so I can make for sure that I keep that seam open while I'm sewing this into place. Now it is time to add the flap to the bag. The pattern tells us to add the flap right sides together with the back exterior in between the O-rings. I clipped along that top edge. It is right sides together, so if you have a magnetic snap, you're looking at it. If you have a twist lock, you're looking at the wrong side of the twist lock there, and so we're just going to baste this into place. Again, I'm going to baste from the wrong side. This time is just because it's easier for me to do it this way. So here is how that flap looks. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave my exterior right sides out, and I'm going to slip it into the lining. If you have a preference as to which side you want the slip pocket to be on, go ahead and orientate it that way. For me, I'm going to have it going towards the back. I went ahead and pulled a little bit of that exterior out through the bottom just so I can have a really good fit while manipulating this together at the top. You'll start by matching up your side seams first, and then you'll clip all the way around, and the exterior and lining should be right sides together at this point. Make sure after you get it clipped together that you take your hand in there and you kind of push everything apart. Sometimes the top will be the same size, but it'll be having some bunching because there's gathering down underneath, like in towards the bottom. So once you put your hand in there, everything should smooth out nicely as long as you sewed the seam allowances correctly and you cut it properly. So you can see on mine, everything fits perfectly. Now what I need to do is I need to go around the top and sew both the lining and the exterior together. I want to make for sure when I'm going across these connectors that I don't shift, because it'll be really easy for them to even just slightly shift a little, even though they're based in place, and they'll look crooked at the end. It happens a lot, I feel like, and so I'm going to try to be careful with it, but I won't get too upset if it's not perfect. But what I'm going to do now, sew around the top with the full seam allowance. I'll trim up some of the seam allowance when I'm done, and then I will birth it through the lining bottom, and then we will see if I can pull it through that zipper pocket to close up my lining. I feel like I definitely got this O-ring completely crooked. I tried several times moving, manipulating. I feel like it's going to look pretty bad. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to trim up a little bit off that connector. Not all of it, but a little bit. And then I'm going to trim up the rest of the seam allowance by about half. So now that I have everything trimmed up, I'm going to just pull everything through this opening in the lining. I definitely left a very small opening here, and I do suggest leaving yours a little bit bigger. It was quite an effort to get the flap and everything to come through. I am not going to close up anything yet. I really want to make sure I can try to get a nice top stitch on the top of the bag before I close anything up. So I like to top stitch from the exterior, so I'm going to tuck the exterior inside the lining, smooth everything out so I can top stitch all around on it before I close everything up. A lot of turning for sure on this one. So this is how it looks. I have a couple of clips on the front, but you can't do much on the back with the flap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start top stitching all along the back. I'm going to top stitch just 1/8 of an inch away, and I'm going to hold down these two pieces to make for sure the seam's going the right way, and I'm getting a nice flat top stitch all across here. I'm going to go slow, try to keep the perfect seam allowance all the way around, even though I don't have anything to guide it much on this side. Whenever I get to the front, I want to make for sure that my exterior is just slightly higher than the lining so that I don't see any lining from the outside of the bag. On your flap and your connectors, you want to make for sure you take the time to smooth everything out and kind of have a little bit of pressure pulling up on the flap and the connector so that you're not sewing over any puckers and it lays really good after you top stitch. This is a small opening on the bag, so it is a little challenging to sew on a flatbed machine. Not the end of the world, but of course if you had a cylinder arm, it'd be much easier, I imagine. Okay, so the structure looks great, no problems, but I cannot handle the connectors the way they are. They are too long and they're crooked. So I'm going to have to go off camera, lower them, and fix them. I'm not going to make you guys watch all those steps, but I'm not closing up anything on the bag. But you can see, I can't. That's not okay. I messed up with it being crooked and I left it way too long, or at least in my thoughts, that's too long. It's not the way I like mine to look. I want them much lower. So I'm gonna lower those, fix those. It probably will take a while, but that's okay. So when I come back though, what I'm gonna do is after I get that finished, then I will go ahead and close up the lining. And I will have to close up the zipper pocket, so probably what I'll do is pull the lining through the opening of the zipper pocket, close it, and then close the zipper pocket lining, get everything closed up, trim all my threads, and come back with 2 complete bags. So let me fix my errors, and then we'll come back and see how good it looks then. So I finally finished both of these bags. They turned out really cute. Yes, I did have to seam rip this one almost entirely to get those connectors much better. The thing is I just didn't base them on properly. So I basted them, but I feel like I already kind of knew that they were a little crooked and I just thought, oh, it'll be okay. And then when I sewed them, it shifted a little bit more. So this time when I did it, I made sure to base them really well. Check them after I basted them, and then when I was sewing everything together, I made sure to be really careful to make sure it was staying straight. Just some things there. Also the fleece, I don't think I'll add fleece in my other ones because it did seem like it wasn't 100% necessary. Where it's a small bag, I used cotton canvas and a SF101. I think I could skip the fleece next time and just make it a little bit of an easier sew for me. Otherwise, let's look at everything. This is the version that has the piping and the twist lock. I used a panel on the back for this one, and you can see the connectors look much better, and the piping looks good. Really good piping. I love that addition. I do think you should try the piping, even if you just want to try it around the flap and then not around the body, but I think it's just a really nice touch on there. This one I used the panel for the flap, a magnetic snap, but on the back I had the really nice decorative zipper with the overlay and the tags. When you open both of these up, they're just the same. I didn't do anything different there. Just have a slip pocket on the inside, and I did not divide mine. I like it big like that so it can hold my phone or a wallet easily. Plenty of room in there. The structure's great. Like I said, perfect structure, but I don't know if I needed all of it. You can choose. If you like a really structured bag, I think the fleece is good. But if you're someone like me that's a little okay with it being a little softer so that it kind of sews a little bit easier, you may want to skip it. I did not make any straps yet. I'll just do a traditional strap. I'm going to look and see if I have any webbing actually that would match this print. I'm hoping I do. I know I did at one point have some, but I may have used it all. Otherwise, you can make a strap out of the fabric by just doing a traditional 4-way fold adjustable strap. So the pattern once again is from Blue Calla. This is the Lilac. My fabrics are all from Jen's Fabrics. Pre-order starts in the middle of March. I do have a rep code, Beth10, which means you save 10%, but then I also get back a 10% to spend on a future purchase with Jen's Fabrics. So that discount's available if you do choose to place an order. Otherwise, I'll have everything listed in the description. And I thank you so much today for watching another one of my Frugal Friday videos. This one was really cute. I really like the way it comes together. I feel like it looks like a high-end bag instead of just like, oh, here's a quick free pattern. I feel like it has a lot of potential to make, to sell, to fancy up. There's so many different things you could do on this pattern. But thank you for watching another Frugal Friday video. I appreciate everyone tuning in, and I hope today that you're able to sew up a pattern, hopefully one of the free ones. But whatever you sew in your sewing room, I just hope you have a wonderful day and make something beautiful. Thanks so much for watching.